Greetings, welcome, Swagatam. The main purpose in this video is to express my solidarity with the youth and students in Jarkand who are fighting the widespread corruption in the system. Education, which is a field I have done my lifelong service, to me is the most sacred service imaginable. It is also the most decisive component of national development. And therefore, corrupting the field of education must be deemed the foremost and most unforgivable anti-national act. There should be zero tolerance for corruption with regard to any aspect of education at all levels. So, the most shocking thing in our country is that the professed love for the country or patriotism happily coexists with monumental corruption in education. And those who are the loudest in proclaiming their patriotic fervor are also experts in defiling the temple of education with corruption. So, a brief word about Jharkhand, in case there is anyone listening to me who is not clear on this issue. Jharkhand is governed by a coalition which is led by JMM, Jarkand Mukti Morcha, of which Hemant Soren, the son of Shibu Soren, is the chief minister, and the Indian National Congress is a member of this Mahagathbandhan, which is ruling Jharkhand. So let's make it very clear that all political parties stand accused, in my opinion, indicted in this respect of polluting the sacred space of education with venality, malfeasance, and corruption. So, I call upon Rahul Gandhi to come out vehemently in the open and to endorse the demands of the agitating students and youth of Jarkand for a CBI inquiry. And if as a consequence of the CBI inquiry, the government in Jharkhand falls, so be it. India is more important than a government in Jharkhand. The welfare and the future of the youth of Jharkhand is more important than X party or Y party ruling Jharkhand. Rahul Gandhi must come out in the open and publicly endorse the demand of the youth in Jharkhand for a CBI inquiry. That's the minimum that he should do, because the integrity of his party, the credibility of his party must be valued far higher than continuing in the government. If the International Congress has to leave the Jarkand government on this issue, they must do so. There should be absolutely no compromise on this issue. And if after the present Mahagathbandhan government falls in Jharkhand, the BJP with its familiar tricks of buying MLAs, breaking parties, etc., come to power, so be it. I would say that every price is worth paying in order to uphold and shore up the integrity and credibility of the International Congress, because that is of long-standing consequence. I sincerely hope that Rahul Gandhi will have the wisdom to understand what I'm trying to say. Now, the second question I want to bring to your notice is this. Why was our country as a whole unaware of this tremendous level of youth frustration building up over a period of time? Why were we taken by surprise? Why were we taken unawares when the Cockroach Janata Party strike happened in Jantar Mantar in Delhi. There's only one reason for it. Nobody cared for the youth of India till the other day. The frustration and the mounting disenchantment, even anger of the youth was very palpable. I could sense it all along. I've been sensing it for the last 10 years at least, if not more. Then how come that those in power, those who really matter, were completely unaware of it? There's only one reason for it, and that is nobody cared for the youth of India. People talked about the demographic dividend, but nobody cared for the youth of India. This is now an open secret, a palpable reality. And at the same time, we take pride in saying that compared to China, we are a young population. About 65% of India is below the age of 37. It's such a country, everybody, whether it's in the central government or in the state governments, being completely indifferent to the needs, the pains, the aspirations of the youth of India, borders on madness. That's why I say again and again, nobody cared for the youth of India, and the youth have realized it, and they are not going to forgive you for it. Why should they? So let's be very clear. The great leaders of this country who have solutions for all problems did not even know that the youth had some problems. Now, I said that, we have been trumpeting to the whole world that we have the demographic dividend in our favor. India is a young population. But what have we done? We have turned this tremendous national resource into a burden, into a nightmare. And that is because we did not make any attempt to create conditions in which this resource of the country can turn into its actual benefit, its actual gain. And therefore, the youth in this country feels most neglected and most slighted, most insulted. And it was this raw spot that the redoubtable Chief Justice of India touched through his most unwarranted, uncharitable, cruel statement that the unemployed youth of India are like cockroaches, that they are parasites. That was the spark that the tinderbox needed to explode. So we have been told for quite some time now that the Prime Minister Modi has solutions to all our problems. Modi hai to sab mumkin hai. Modi hai to sab mumkin hai. Which means our great Prime Minister has solutions for all our problems. And therefore, naturally the question will arise, why did he do nothing to solve the problems of the youth of India? If he had not claimed that he had the solutions for all our problems, this question would have been still raised, but it would not have had as much power and relevance. So let's face this very blatant reality. We neglected our youth. We developed a very contemptuous attitude towards them, which was expressed by the Chief Justice of India by labeling them cockroaches and parasites. Now, be that as it may, one thing I have to say with all the conviction I can muster, and that is, the woes of our youth will not end with the eradication of corruption in conducting examinations. I'm not saying that that corruption will end all that easily, because those who are in the habit of keeping their hands in the till will not grow out of it. It's a very strong form of addiction. So one way or the other, they'll continue to return to their old games. But let's assume that corruption is eliminated. Do you think that will end the problems of the youth in this country? Not at all. The issues that they are facing are far bigger and more wide-ranging than that. And through the rest of my time, I'll highlight some of them. In the ultimate analysis, the core problem that the youth of India is facing is our idea of development. It's not education that's the primary problem. It's our idea of development. Education is a secondary problem. If your idea of development is not right, then you will not value education, because after all, education is assumed to be the foremost determinant or the key factor in development. But what sort of development? Education is not at all an important factor in the kind of development that is being pursued today. So, the real issue from which the youth of India are suffering is not education. The primary issue is our idea of development. Let's understand this issue. Our whole country is being run for the sake of a few billionaires. We take pride in saying that India has the maximum number of billionaires in Asia. So the problems of 1.4 billion people must be forgotten for the sake of creating a few more billionaires. That is the heartless and subhuman stupidity which is driving the engine of our development. Let's ask the question, who does our Prime Minister stand with? With whom is Mr. Modi in solidarity? To understand this, all you have to do is, there are many indicators, but all you have to do is to look at the tax subsidy that's provided to our giant industrialists. The tax subsidy given to the corporate giants, and let's just quote figures for 5 years, so that we are really talking about the factual data. Beginning from 2019, I'm going to share with you the tax subsidy given to the corporate giants in this country, the richest in this country. So it makes interesting reading. In the year 2019-20, it was only 8,300 crores. In 2020-2029, it jumped up to 75,218 crores. In the next year, that is 21-22, it increased to 96,892 crores. The subsidy given to the richest corporate giants in this country. In 2022-23, it was 88,100 crores. In 2023-24, it was 98,999 crores. So in 5 years' time, the Modi government has given tax subsidy to our richest corporate magnates to the tune of 3,67,761 crores of rupees. This is about 50% of the total allocation for education during this 5-year period. Let that figure sink in. The tax subsidy given to a handful of corporates in India is 50% of the total amount earmarked for education to educate the crores of children and youth in this country. It's equal to 50% of that amount. Of course, besides this tax subsidy, the corporate giants also enjoy other benefits, hidden benefits. Like, for example, as has been brought to light recently during the Bihar elections, Adani was given 1,000 acres of land in Bihar at the rate of 1 rupee per acre. You try and buy an acre of land for 1 rupee, then you know what it is. Just to give you one example, there are other benefits as well. So if you add up all this, you will see that more of our national resources are spent freely on our corporate giants to fatten the fat already, as compared to what is invested in educating our children and empowering our youth. But nobody will talk about this. So, this being the benefit given to the corporate giants, we have to now naturally ask the question, how many jobs have they generated? There is no data on it. One thing I know for sure, the tax subsidy given to them was justified by the central government on the basis that these corporate giants, the big industrial houses, are ones who generate jobs in this country. But nobody will tell you how many jobs they have generated. But we know that youth unemployment continue to aggravate Year after year, thanks to the great employment generation by our fat and fattened corporate giants. What's the level of our youth unemployment today? The youth between 15 and 29, 17%, only 17% of the youth in this category are employed. And if you talk about Jharkhand, where this issue is even worse, only 3.6% of the youth in this age group, 15 to 29, are employed. So you can imagine how acute the unemployment problem is. So this scarcity in the job market, based on the demand-supply principle, creates the ideal climate for practicing corruption and makes corruption the most rewarding activity you can imagine. If the supply is equal to the demand, there is zero scope for corruption. If the supply is completely unequal to the demand, then there is maximum scope for corruption. So it creates an absolutely wonderful field day for the politicians, this kind of atrocious situation in which the youth of India are perishing. So now the youth of Jharkhand have erupted. A short while ago, I was watching the news and I found them besieging the assembly of Jarkand, the Jarkand assembly. But fortunately, Hemant Soren seems to have learned from the Delhi experience. So his police is not unleashing brutalities on the protesting youth and students. And ironically, the BJP is also at the forefront of demanding corruption-free examinations there. While the students were protesting here, the BJP-led government unleashed terror on them. Water cannons, lathis, batons, metal bullets, metal pellets, and in Bihar, AK-47 and various forms of aggression. But in Jharkhand, the BJP is a completely different avatar. It's all for purity, all for transparency, all for accountability. That's wonderful. So the BJP's double stand, if at all anyone needs to take note of it. Now, the next thing I want to bring to your notice is this. We need to see the youth unrest in a wider context and ask the question, for whose sake, of whose benefit is India run? And why is it that no attempt really is being made to increase the scope for employment? Now, if you don't increase the employment scope, all you can do is to try and ruin the eligibility for employment. I'm making a very important point here, which explains to you why education is in this pitiable plight. Education becomes, particularly higher education and higher and technical education, becomes a nightmare for a government that either cannot or does not want to increase employment. The most comforting thing for the government is that the youth of the country are not eligible for jobs. And how do you render them ineligible? By ruining education. So, having served in the field of education all my life, I sometimes feel that there is a deliberate agenda at work in ruining the very soul of education in this country. So, the further thing I want to say is a problem far worse than the way in which, the abysmal way in which eligibility tests are conducted is the atrocious poor quality of education that we impart to the youths. In a majority of cases, frankly speaking, especially with regard to higher education, college education, it's not worth having that education. I dare say that about 50% of the colleges, we have got about 39,000 colleges in this country. 50% of them are not worth it. And it's in vain that you send your children there for education. So, it's not merely that there is serious corruption in the conduct of examination, but also that the quality of education that the youth, our children and our youth are given is really heartbreaking. Now, there's another aspect of the situation that we need to consider, and that is the youth of India today feel deeply disenchanted, unbearably hurt, and they are resentful because wherever they turn, whatever they hear is all about celebrating the growth story of India. You listen to our leaders, India is fast rushing towards the status of an economic superpower. We are already the fourth largest economy in the world. We are the fastest developed economy in the world. We are about to become the third most important economic superpower, because now we have gone to the sixth. But the youth would say, what about our plight? Why are we in this state? So anyway, coming back to education, there's another thing you can notice, and that is whether it be in the central government or in the state governments, without exception, you will find maybe one or two exceptions here and there, that those who are given the education portfolio would be the least qualified for it. Ideally, the least educated. And that tells its own story. I don't think this is an accident. In a way, I feel that removing Dharmendra Pradhan as the education minister is a loss, because he has been succeeded by somebody whose credentials, if any, are poorer. The less said about it, the better. So, now take the case of Jarkand. I'm not saying that Hemant Soren is such a low-quality individual. All I'm saying is that Hemant Soren has 15 portfolios under his belt. 15 portfolios, including education. How much time do you think he can give to education? Of course, because he is the chief minister, the allocation for education in Jharkhand is far, far better than either the central government or all other states. 18% of the state budget in Jarkand is set apart for education because the chief minister is handling it. And how that money is being used must be investigated. The youth of Jarkand should not just talk with the present agitation. The next demand should be, give us an account of this 18,000 crores set apart for education in Jarkand. How is that being spent? So, there are various ways in which education is being ruined. For example, all the major appointments, administrative appointments in education, are done without any regard for merit. Just look at the vice chancellors appointed in the last 5 years and see how many of them are distinguished in the field of education. So, the core demand of the youth of India must be that their share in the national wealth, their share in the budget allocation must be commensurate with their position in India's demography. Not only that, it should also be such that it compensates for the terrible and tragic criminal neglect that's been inflicted on them for these many years. Now, BJP came to power saying that they will put 6% of our GDP into education. That was 2013-14. Now, after 12 years, it is still 2.5%. Why? There must be answers to these questions. The Kothari Commission report of 1964 recommended that at least 6% of GDP must be invested in education at that time, and said every year there must be an increase in budgetary allocation for education. There has been a decrease, and it has reached its lowest level with the BJP government. That's an issue that the youth cannot overlook. So there are multiple issues. It's not just one issue, the issue that some question papers have leaked. That's only a small problem. The issues here are very huge, humongous. And unless and until A comprehensive view is taken of all these ingredients that together constitute the misery and the degradation of the youth of India. India itself will have no future. A country that neglects its youth is a country that ruins its future. So the folly, the stupidity that we are committing today is that in order to create some glitter and glory at the present time and to allocate all that to one man called Modi, who is celebrated as a national icon, who has solution to all our problems, the future of India is being ruined. This is the reality that stares us in the face. Those who have the courage to read the writings on the wall may do so. I have discharged my obligations by my country out of my love for my country and my fellow countrymen. May God bless India. May God reduce the burden of hopelessness, the burden of resentment, the burden of anxiety about the future that the young people are crushed under. May they have a better tomorrow. Jai Hind.